Just about every social condition that Aboriginal people are facing in Canada today has them at the lower end of the social condition scale. So employment rates are the poorest, the incarceration rates are the highest, number of Aboriginal children in care, the health issues that Aboriginal people face, home situation, water quality situation, the infrastructure situation generally in their communities, and their income levels, and the gap between their income level and income level of the rest of Canada is widening. All of those conditions relate to the experience that Aboriginal people have had to undergo since Confederation, of which the residential schools were a significant part, because one would have thought that education would have been the solution to help get them out of those social impoverishment situations, and to have prevented them from getting overly involved in the child welfare and justice systems. But the education system through residential schools, as well as the public school system, as well as the overall treatment of Aboriginal rights by Canada's legal system, and I'm not just talking about courts, but also about the legislative system, have all combined to push Indigenous people to the bottom of the social justice scale in this country.
And are governments not aware that perhaps they are repeating the mistakes of the past?
I don't think they were aware until we made the point so forcefully. I think they saw Indigenous issues as just another social problem that could be addressed through funding, increased funding, and providing more money, or perhaps better spending the existing monies that they've got. When in reality, it's not just about money. The money needs to be there because the social conditions are so bad that additional resources are required. But it's also about who controls that, who makes decisions about that. It's about the fact that when you look, for example, at the amount of money that Indigenous Affairs spends on Aboriginal people in this country, Indigenous people in this country, you realize that probably 40% or more of what they are provided by the government actually goes to the Department of Indigenous Affairs and doesn't go to the communities. And so they're spending a lot of money on themselves to service a problem that they've created. And that needs to be addressed. And so what we have said is we need to recognize that our current ways of approaching the legacy of residential schools, the legacy of the social, political, and legal attacks upon Indigenous people that they've experienced since Confederation, can better be addressed if we engage with Indigenous people in a more self-determining way. We think leadership's the key. We said that in the text of our calls to action, that leadership is vital. Leadership in which not just the Prime Minister, but all levels of leadership in this country talk about how important this is, that this matters to them, that the change in the relationship is an important change that needs to be undertaken. Just as occurred in the 19th century, when every leader in this country talked about the need to suppress and indoctrinate Indigenous people into European cultural and religious systems. We need now for our leadership to say that Indigenous people need to have the opportunity to be allowed to determine their own lives and their own internal functioning. If that comes from the Prime Minister's office alone, that would be a significant and huge step, because that will send a message throughout the political system, as well as throughout the federal bureaucracy, that people need to change the way they think about things. But on top of that, there are specific actions that we think the federal government needs to take that will make sure that in the long term we continue in the process that we commit ourselves to now. The National Council for Reconciliation is important. The World Proclamation on Reconciliation we think is important. And taking steps to implement the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, particularly as a framework, as a dialogue process for reconciliation in this country, we think is very important.